Hi, everyone, and welcome. We are so blessed to have Gina Vild here. She is going to be doing an incredible webinar for us today. And, she has been in the cancer field and in the industry for so many years, and we're very, very fortunate to have her. She has co-authored the 2 most important days, How to Find Your Purpose and Live a Happier, Healthier Life. And she's actually writing a second book about resilience. And I think you're going to hear a little bit about that today. And very, very excited about this. And, such an important topic as it applies to everyone. Gina has really been personally affected by cancer. And she has been a loyal friend and supporter to LFSA really since it's in our inception as an organization. And I thank you for that, Gina. And, we're fortunate to have her today. And I really hope we have the opportunity to have her back many more times in the future. So without further ado, I want to get you to the most important person here, and that's Gina. So Gina, welcome on behalf of everybody here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And welcome from Boston. I don't know if everyone who's watching is in Boston, if you're visiting us from throughout the country, but I'm really delighted to have been invited to be a part of this discussion. And I'd like to thank you, Jen, for that really lovely introduction. And I want to thank Debbie Soprano. Debbie Soprano invited me to talk with you today. And as you know, Jen and Debbie are passionate about their work with LFSA and are putting tremendous energy into advancing the issue that you care so deeply about. You are both such a bright light for all of us, so thank you. Debbie, I want to just mention, and I have known each other since 1988 when we were at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. We share a passion to advancing progress against cancer in its many forms. And I've actually worked in the cancer field for 10 years as the Chief Communications Officer at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and the Jimmy Fund, and also as the Director of Marketing at the Massachusetts General Cancer Center. And I'm currently doing some work with the Joe Biden campaign to talk about health issues with an oncologist for voters throughout the country. I'm really honored because when I was at Dana-Farber, I worked closely with Dr. Fred Lee, and he was just extraordinary. And I, interestingly, had the privilege of working with his wife, Dr. Elaine Chung, when I worked at MIT for 4 years. So I fully understand the impact that his scientific discovery has had on so many lives. And I saw firsthand his drive to advance knowledge about the Li-Fraumeni syndrome. So I want to applaud all of you who are here today for your efforts to help advance and support LFSA. You are on the front lines of this cancer epidemiology and treatment effort, and your contributions are helping so many address the unique challenges presented by this syndrome. In this moment, the world, as we all well know, is in the midst of a life-threatening pandemic. The global community is grappling with fear of disease and the loss of a predictable future. And I was thinking about that this morning, and that you who are with us today are so well familiar with these concerns, fear of disease and loss of a predictable future, because you have long grappled with this through LFS. So you know what it feels like to live with uncertainty, and you too are eager for scientific revelations that will answer your questions and eliminate threat of disease. So because of your unique experience, we'd like to look to you too as we all struggle to navigate our uncertain future. And as we talk today, I'd love to have your reflections on these issues, and please share anything that you may have learned in your journey. I'm hoping we can make this interactive. I'm sorry we can't all be together in person, but please offer comments or questions in the chat box, or raise your hand and ask your question. And we will try to deal with and address as many questions and share your thoughts as possible. And if you have a pen and paper, I'm going to ask you to write a few things down just for yourself, so that would be helpful. So I was asked to talk about happiness and resilience. And as Jen mentioned, Dr. Sanjeev Chopra and I authored the 2 most important days, How to Find Your Purpose and Live a Happier, Healthier Life. And I'm currently working on a book on the topic of resilience. Those 2 topics, happiness and resilience, are intricately linked. Those who identify as being both happy and resilient tend to share those qualities. People who are happy and resilient are optimistic. They are purpose-driven. They tend to know their life purpose. And people who are happy and resilient succeed and flourish despite setbacks because they understand how to approach adversity. Nelson Mandela said, "Do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up." So true, right? So first, let's talk about happiness. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about resilience. And then, depending on how much time we have, there are tools that I would like to suggest and offer, a few of many that will help us both become happier and more resilient. So I can't see you. So metaphorically, raise your hand if you're happy. And I'm going to assume a great many people are raising their hand. And then I'd like to ask you to raise your hand if you'd like to be happier. And I'm going to guess that almost everyone has their hand raised. And it's not unusual that we're striving to be happier. This morning I searched Amazon for happiness, and there are over 100,000 posts. And last week I posted a blog on Psychology Today about a recent study conducted by Norrick at the University of Chicago. And it showed that fewer people are happy today than at any time over the past 5 decades. People say they are unhappier today than at any time in 50 years. So I'm wondering, does that surprise you? The study found that only 14% of American adults today say they are very happy. This represents a rapid decline because only 2 years ago, in 1918, 31% of those surveyed, this is an annual survey, said they were very happy. The study also indicated today that people are much less optimistic. So is there anything we can do about this? Is there anything we can do to alter our state of mind? And I would like to say yes, a resounding yes. So I'll talk to you about the resources that will make us happier and more resilient. But first, let's talk about happiness. So why do we want to be happy? Are there actual measurable benefits from being happy? And there are. So I've identified 5. Happy people radiate happiness and create a positive feedback loop. And you know that's true because don't you love being around people who are happy and give off that positive energy? It feeds you, and you in turn become happier, and you give that happiness and joy right back to them. Happy people have better relationships and a richer sense of community. People who identify as being happy tend to have more respect and honor for the interconnectedness of life. They know we don't live on an island, but that we live in community. A Harvard Business School study showed that employees are far more likely to have new ideas on days when they're happier. So if you are managing a team, it's to the benefit of the organization that we try to keep them happy. And happy people, number 4, are more creative and productive. There are many who think that misery is a muse, but that's not true. We know that happiness is the muse for creativity. And here's the true benefit, the most important benefit. Optimists have healthier hearts. Happiness cuts coronary disease in half. Happy people have more friends, and people who have more friends, studies show, have lowered blood pressure, a better immune system, a better immune response, less depression, and less insomnia. So the bonus is this. Research indicates that the happier you are, the healthier you are, and you may even live longer. So there's a tremendous incentive to look at what it is that will boost our happiness quotient. I have a story that I love to tell about attributed to John Lennon. He said, when I was 5 years old, my mother always told me that happiness was the key to life. When I went to school, my teacher asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I wrote down happy. My teacher told me I didn't understand the assignment, and I told her she doesn't understand life. Isn't that a great story? So there is a formula by which we measure happiness, and it was developed by a team of researchers led by the father of positive psychology, Martin Seligman. And its happiness is equal to your set point plus your living conditions plus voluntary actions. So here's how it works. 50% of your happiness quotient, how you would identify your mood and level of happiness, is inherited. What we call it is your genetic set point. So whatever happens, ups or downs, if you win the lottery, lose your job, get a great new job, have a health setback, have a wonderful experience like having a baby, you tend to return to your set point within 3 months. And this is called hedonic adaptation, where you return to your genetic set point. And there are a couple of exceptions. If you win the lottery, you'll return to your set point. But if you win the lottery and you give money away to make other people's lives better, you will have a boost in your happiness quotient. And if you spend the money not on things, but on experiences, and especially on the experiences with others, celebrating your friendship, it will have a longer lasting effect on your happiness quotient. Another exception is losing a spouse. So what research has shown is you will not return to your set point within 3 months, that it varies by individuals, but it takes much longer. So that's 50%. 10% of your happiness quotient is dependent on satisfaction with life circumstances, your living conditions. You probably remember studying Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If your very basic needs are met, that's about 10%. So whether you are in a mansion in Beverly Hills or the slums of Calcutta, your potential for happiness is truly basically the same. So when we meet in person, I often ask people if they're worried that their set point is too low, and they generally are. So I have some information that will cheer you up if you're thinking the same thing. An astounding 40% of your happiness quotient is up to you. It is determined by intentional activities, voluntary actions, how you choose to live your life. Our book is all about that. Our book is about many, many voluntary actions and practical steps you can take to boost your genetic set point. It examines the science behind happiness and introduces the wisdom of Hafiz and Gandhi and Mother Teresa and the Buddha and Rumi and 10 poets. But at the core of our quest to be happy is this understanding. Happiness is a choice. These voluntary actions will elevate your set point, but you have to choose to do that. You have to choose the actions that will make you happier. The author and motivational speaker Rick Riordan said, "We only have one life to live, but we can choose what kind of story it's going to be." That's true, isn't it? We can choose what kind of story we are living. And what's interesting is the Greeks knew this long before we had science that pointed us in this direction. So Heraclitus, the philosopher, said, "The content of your character is a choice." The content of your character is a choice. So what Rick Riordan and Heraclitus both are saying is that every day, the choices you make, what you choose to think about, which we'll talk about later, and what you do is who you become. Today, we have a great understanding of the physiological, neurochemical, and behavioral underpinnings of happiness and living a life of purpose. But what we've learned is that modern science is really only confirming what we knew from the ancient Greeks. So, and there are scientific studies that correlate resilience with happiness. So let's take a few minutes and talk about resilience. No one escapes bumps in the road, right? Sometimes even massive craters. So why is it? Have you ever wondered, no matter what the trauma or disappointment, some people rally with fortitude and ultimately thrive, while others sink into despair? When the proverbial barn burns down, why do some weep and others say, "Now I can see the stars"? So here are characteristics of those who are resilient. Those who are resilient accept, as the Buddhists teach us, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Think about that. Suffering really is optional, but not pain. They understand that we will experience grief, trauma, physical discomfort, even illness, and also the everyday pain like anxiety, stress, disappointment, and regret. But resilient people don't assign meaning to these experiences. And there's much more we don't have time to say about this, but this is really a key. You don't assign emotional meaning to the pitfalls in life and to the setbacks and to the problems. Resilient people don't try to change others. They don't view themselves as a victim. They accept the emotional disappointments and setbacks as part of life. They embrace, as you've often heard, I know I'm not telling you something you may not have thought about, the serenity prayer. They accept the things they cannot change. They have the courage to change the things they can and the wisdom to know the difference. There's an astounding quote that I think is an astounding quote by Joseph Campbell, who reminds us the first step to the knowledge of the wonder and mystery of life is in the recognition of the monstrous nature of the earthly human realm as well as the glory. The juxtaposition between the monstrous nature of being human and the glory of being human. And as Joan Didion, one of my favorite authors, writes, and I paraphrase, people who are resilient know the cost of things. They know the cost of their decisions. They accept the risk. The Indians, as she says, may be hostile. The venture may go bankrupt. The marriage may not work out. But they know that when they play the game of life, there are odds, and they accept those odds. 2, people who are resilient consciously develop life skills to help detach from the sadness associated with misfortune. And that's not easy. Detaching is one of life's most valuable skills. Marty Rubin said, "All the things I don't want are making me very happy." That's detachment. All the things I don't want are making me very happy. And Gabrielle Zevin said, "They should tell you when you're born. Have a suitcase heart. Be ready to travel." You have to let go of things. By detaching, they're understanding that they, like with happiness, you have a choice to hold on to the pain or to let it go. Resilient people are compassionate with themselves. 3, resilient people navigate hardship and gain insights that enrich and help them flourish. They use the life experience almost as a tutorial to live a better life. They have learned how to have gifts in adversity. The Chinese say crisis is an opportunity. It may be a little overused, but it is because there's a lot of truth in that. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I absolutely love this quote, said, the most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These people have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep, loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen. And if you think about people with the deepest hearts and the most compassion, you may actually see they are people who have struggled. There's something called the resilience theory. It argues that it's not the hardship or adversity that's important, but rather how we learn to deal with misfortune that gives us resilience, that enables us to survive and even thrive. And I'll talk in a minute about Viktor Frankl, because that is one of the most tremendous lessons from his extraordinary book, Man's Search for Meaning. So can these traits of resilient people be learned? Are there tools that will help us build fortitude? I think there are, and many others think there are. I recall a teacher once telling me when my children were younger that the most successful people in life are not, as one may think, the A students, but rather the B students. When you look at the CEOs and you look at the top achievers later in life, they were the B students because they've learned to fail and they've learned how to navigate their way back to success. And to share with you personally my interest in this topic, I will share that I've experienced tremendous loss in my life. I lost my healthy parents unexpectedly within 72 days, 2 months of each other when I was very young. And my only sibling, my brother, died of cancer at 48. I went through the trauma of divorce after 28 years of a mostly happy marriage. I've had professional setbacks and I have had deeply personal heartache. So that's my journey. And there are many others who have experienced much greater tragedy and adversity. And there are others who may have had less, but nevertheless, everyone has to find a way to deal with disappointment and loss. I wasn't asked to discuss grief today, but I recognize that many of you have also experienced loss, and your organization has experienced a serious loss very recently. So just a brief detour. I'd like to share with you words of wisdom of others that inspire me, and maybe they will speak to you as well. Julian Barnes, the author, wrote in a book I love, The Levels of Life, an essay about the loss of his wife. And he says, nature is so exact. It hurts exactly as much as it's worth. So in a way, one relishes the pain, I think. If it didn't matter, it wouldn't matter. Nature is so exact. It hurts exactly as much as it's worth. So in a way, one relishes the pain. If it didn't matter, it wouldn't matter. And there's a book, if anyone is interested in studies of grief, that is just exquisite. And I'm reading it in little snippets because it's so rich and thought-provoking. I don't want to rush through it. And it's called The Wild Edge of Sorrow, Rituals of Renewal and the Sacred Work of Grief. And it taught me this. It's a quote from the book. And it gives you a sense of the lyricism of the writing. Grief and love are sisters, woven together from the beginning. Their kinship reminds us that there is no love that does not contain loss, and no loss that is not a reminder of the love we carry for what we once held close, which I think is so true. I've also relied on the writing of Elizabeth Gilbert, who you may know as the author of Eat, Pray, Love. That's what she's most known for. But she recently lost her life partner, and she has been giving some really thought-provoking interviews on the subject of loss and grief. And she speaks so eloquently. And she says it's an honor to be in grief. It's an honor to feel that much, to have loved that much. And she talks about the unexpected visits that grief makes. Grief, she says, happens upon you. It's bigger than you. There's a humility that you have to step into, where you surrender to being moved through the landscape of grief by grief itself. And it has its own time frame. It has its own itinerary with you. It has its own power with you. It will come when it comes. And when it comes, it's a bow down. And it comes when it wants to, and it carves you out in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day, in the middle of a meeting, in the middle of a meal. It arrives in this tremendous, forceful arrival, and it cannot be resisted without you suffering more. So the posture she recommends you take is to hit your knees in absolute humility and honor it, and let it rock you until it is done with you, and it will be done with you. Rumi, the extraordinary 13th century Persian poet, said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." The wound is the place where the light enters you. So this is a challenge, going back to resilience, of bouncing back, to use the darkness to illuminate the future. Let us connect now happiness and resilience.
Hey, Gina.
Yeah.
We do have a question. Can I think it's related to what you were talking about just a little bit ago. The question is, how does your self-esteem and or self-perception play into your happiness?
That's a very interesting question. And the way I would address that, and we'll talk about it a lot more later, is the heart of this, the secret to this is gratitude. No matter how you feel and no matter what has happened in your life, there is no question that having gratitude practices will help you through it and change your mood and elevate your mindset. So we come to that, and it's a really good question. But I think that is the way you address your self-esteem, is look at all the things in life. And let's talk about that. We'll talk about it more in a minute. So people who identify as happy also tend to be resilient, and those who've cultivated resilience also tend to be happier. There's a longitudinal study published in the Journal of Psychosocial Research that found happiness is the best predictor of resilience. So if you're looking for resilient people, ask them how happy they are. And if you want to be more resilient, look at some of the practices that will boost that 40% of voluntary actions for your happiness quotient. So I have some tools I'd like to sort of touch on. Our book is filled with many tools, but I've narrowed it down for this conversation to what I call the 4Fs and the G. So 4Fs and the G: focus, forgiveness, for others, friends, and gratitude. So focus. To be more resilient and to have greater happiness, it's very important to manage your thoughts. And that is easier said than done, but it is really at the core of how you can respond. Someone said, when life throws thorns, hunt for roses. You can choose to see the thorns or to see the roses. And how you think about a situation directly correlates to how you emotionally respond to it. So I mentioned earlier, one of the most inspirational books I feel that's ever been written, and I would recommend everyone read it once a year actually, is a book called, it's a little book, I think it's only 140 pages, and it's called Man's Search for Meaning by the most eloquent Viktor Frankl. He was an Austrian psychiatrist and a survivor of Auschwitz. And he contemplated why some prisoners found meaning in the most dire of circumstances. And he brought understanding to the question of why some prisoners would kill for the last slice of bread or a pair of boots, and others would give them theirs away. So here's a profound truth that he articulates. And this really goes to focus and managing your thoughts. But I think it's one of the most heartfelt messages for life. He famously wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." He illustrates in his book with the story of a young woman. I read this years ago, and I actually put it in our book on happiness because it made such an impression on me, is that there's a story of a young woman who was imprisoned, and she knew she was about to be put to death. And he went to visit her in a solitary cell, and she was cheerful. And he questioned, why was she cheerful? And she told him that through the window of her cell, she could see a tree and a bird, and witnessing this gave her joy. She chose to live in the moment and to focus on joy and the happiness during the darkest days of her life, at what turned out to be the end of her life. So you can choose, and his book is filled with just rich and painful examples, but uplifting examples of how you can manage the absolute greatest of adversity. There's another book, it's an extraordinary book I would recommend. We don't have time to really discuss it in any detail today here, but I bought it for my children because I think it's a workbook. It's a really good book to have on hand. And it's called The Feeling Good Handbook by Dr. David Burns. It's literally a handbook with exercises that guide you to manage your thought process and guide you to deal with diverse adversity. He offers practices that help you manage your thoughts. He identifies practices that we all have that sabotage our thinking. And a couple of them, just to mention them very briefly, is you identify, are you an all or nothing thinker? Do you see things for their nuance, or do you see things in black and white? Do you overgeneralize? Do you link each disappointment to the last one, or do you see each one as an individual situation? Because when you link each disappointment or setback to the last one, it really does affect your self-esteem, as opposed to looking at it in its entirety and moving on. He examines mental filters. Do you find positives in the situation you're dealing with, or do you only see the negative? My friend lost his job recently, and he turned his thinking from one of failure into one of opportunity, where he is so motivated now, thinking about new activities and a gift. He probably would have stayed in his job for a very long time because it was secure. And now he's reading books, he's exploring new career opportunities, a new way to structure his professional life. He's spending more time with his children. That's the mental filter. How do you look at those situations in your own life? And labeling. When something happens to you, do you say, I made a mistake, or I'm a failure, I'm a victim, or do you say, again, remember I said you don't attach meaning to it. This happened. Let me move on. So there are a lot of really interesting exercises in that book. But now let's talk about gratitude, which is one of my favorite topics. And it goes back to that very good question on self-esteem. So Robert Edmonds, the University of California, Davis, is one of the foremost experts on gratitude. And he determined that a gratitude practice has these benefits. People who have a gratitude practice where you routinely and regularly acknowledge and write down the things in your life for which you're grateful have more meaningful relationships, probably because they're consciously appreciating them, right? 2, people who have a gratitude practice have better physical health and habits of self-care. He said people with a gratitude practice have better mental health and less negative emotion, as evidenced by higher scores on academic tests. They have increased empathy and reduced aggression, regular, more restful sleep, and increased self-esteem and reduced social envy. And 7, greater resistance to trauma. So that is pretty powerful. And there is a great deal of research out there in gratitude. So I encourage everyone who's interested in this to take a deep dive. And we have quite a bit of it in our book, but there's a wealth of information. Robert Edmonds, in his book Thanks, writes, if you express gratitude for a few minutes every day for 6 weeks, just a few minutes every day, you can boost your set point of happiness, which I referred to earlier, by an astounding 45%. I have long had a sign hanging on one of the doors of my house, and it says, having it all is believing that you do. And that's a gratitude practice, right? It's not wanting and yearning, but looking at all the riches in your life, your friends, your health, the books that are on your shelf to read, and being grateful. And when my children were young, and there are many activities you can start if you have young children to embed a gratitude practice. And every night when I read them a bedtime story, I would keep a journal before they could write and ask them, what's one thing that made you happy today? Because I wanted them to start thinking about the joy and not fall asleep thinking about the negativity of the day, but thinking about something wonderful. And there was a study I remember reading years ago when I was at Harvard Medical School back in, I think the study was done in 2010, but around that period. And it said that recalling happy memories at bedtime will tend to create more happiness and joy in people. And I found that astounding because from the time I was a child, I had a lifelong practice. When I would fall asleep at night, I would think about what fun, happy thing happened during the day. And I would fall asleep thinking about it, and then was astounded when I saw there was actually research that showed it was meaningful. And it is important, all the theorists around gratitude say, to write your gratitudes down. It embeds it in a much more meaningful way. So for a number of years, a friend of mine who lives in Iowa and I, we would send each other 3 gratitudes every day. Simple. A baby's small tooth, a full moon, roses blooming in the garden. And we did it as a way to force ourselves into the practice, because I knew she was waiting for my 3 things and I was waiting for her. So there are a lot of really fun things you can do to build a gratitude practice. For 1 month, write gratitudes, 1 a day, to your partner or your spouse. Mahatma Gandhi said, happiness is when what you think and what you say and what you do is in harmony. So a gratitude practice brings you closer to that harmony. So now I said I was going to ask you to write things down. Please write down on your piece of paper 1 thing you're grateful for. And if you'd like, please share it in the chat box. Anything that just you're grateful for today. And I promise you, if you do that, you're going to feel better. And when you see if others are willing to share something they're grateful for, it will make us all feel good. And I'm going to keep going while you think about that and do that. But
if you'd like to hear them, just let me know, Gina. They're starting to come in. So
good. And when you think about gratitude, it helps to think about how you've structured your life. So this, I think, is kind of fun to think about, but be mindful of what people say on their deathbed. Do they say, I should have bought a Tesla? Or there's a New Yorker cartoon that's actually, I love, that it was a man who was elderly, and his dying breath, he says, I should have bought more stuff. So here's what people say in hospice. And these are actually studies that have come from hospice. I should have spent more time with friends. I should have said I love you more often. I should have traveled more. I should have said I'm sorry. I should have had the courage to pursue my dreams and aspirations. So think about that and align it with how the structure of how you're living your life. And so as we think about a gratitude practice and resilience, one of the things that I have learned, and I shared some of my heartbreaking experiences with you, is that gratitude has taught me that even darkness deserves recognition and gratitude. So be grateful for that. I have learned in my life that not all growth takes place in the sunlight. One of my favorite poets who died last year, Mary Oliver, said, someone once gave me a box full of darkness, and I realized that that too was a gift. Now, friendship. I want to talk about the importance of friendship. Mother Teresa said, there is more hunger for love and appreciation in this world than for bread. So true, isn't it? More hunger for love and appreciation than for bread. And I also want to share with you the words of motivational speaker Jim Rohn. And I'm glad you have your piece of paper and your pen, because you don't have to share this, but I'm going to ask you to write this down. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So jot that down. Think about that. Who are the 5 people you spend the most time with? And Jim Rohn believes you are the average of those people. And why is that? It's because of the people you spend time with most shape who you are. They determine what conversations dominate your attention. They affect which attitudes and behaviors you're regularly exposed to. Eventually, when you start to think like each other and you start to behave like each other, and there's studies about this, right down to people start weighing in at the same basic weight of each other. So when you think about that feedback loop I mentioned earlier, happy people create a feedback loop. So if you're with happy people, that feeds you and you feeds them. And think about how negative people make you feel. And I'm sure someone will come to mind. Now think about someone who has who's uplifting with their presence. So who do you prefer to be with, and how does that affect your mindset and your mood? And write down, even as I keep going, write down the 5 people you spend the most time with. And remember, you are choosing your life and who is in it. My son reminds me every once in a while when I vent about something, he'll say, Mom, get over it. You are the architect of your life. If you're not happy about something, fix it. And to a degree, much of the time we can fix the situation, or if not, like Viktor Frankl said, we can change the way we think about it. Social psychologist Dr. David McClellan of Harvard wrote that the people you habitually associate with determine as much as 95% of your success or failure in life. That's huge. So think about those 5 people again. There's a study many of you, especially if you're in the academic world, know of a study called the Harvard Grant Study. And we discuss this at length in our book, but for over 75 years, the study has tracked the physical and emotional well-being of 2 populations: poor men growing up in Boston and male graduates from Harvard's classes. And it's really comprehensive. It involves surveys and brain scans and blood samples, and President Kennedy was in this cohort. The findings from this study are clear. The message we get from this 75-year study is this: good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. It showed us that loneliness is toxic. And the greatest predictor of happiness and good health is love. Those who are lonely die earlier and their physical health declines. But it's not just the number of friends, it's the quality of the friends. Those 5 people again, more quarters, fewer pennies. And what matters is how willing you are to be open and to let other people see your vulnerability, allowing yourself to be seen. And this toxic loneliness being toxic, I worry about this because when you look at the happiness study out of the University of Chicago, we have all been to some degree under lockdown or quarantine, and you just know there are people who have not had human contact because they're elderly and worried about their health. So this is something we should all be very mindful of and very thoughtful about. How can we help others who may be grappling with this? But when I talk about vulnerability, I will share this because I included this in our book because I read this years ago, that there's a word that I love. It's called Sobana. It's an African Zulu greeting that means we see you. It's not I, but we, because it establishes you as a witness to others and their presence. It's an agreement when you say it, to see each other and affirm the reality that seeing has empowered us to investigate our mutual potential. It asks the question of, what does this moment of time enable us to do? What is the potential? Subhana says, we see your humanity, we see your dignity and respect. It's so much nicer than how are you, right? So when you greet someone, think about that. Having them know, I see you, because the ancient philosophers knew the most important thing in life is to be seen. And many people, for professional reasons or others, are very guarded. But those people who tend to be happier and more open allow themselves to be vulnerable. And there's a wonderful TED Talk, Brene Brown, on the power of vulnerability. Another one of the F's is forgiveness. And we know that forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it certainly will bring solace and is necessary for spiritual growth and resilience. It's a conscious desire to live a life of peace and understanding. There have been studies that demonstrate that those who exhibit resilience tend to embrace forgiveness. To harbor grudges from the past replays the old pain over and over and prohibits healings. And think about it, whatever the pain was in the past, it's over. We have so few moments in life, and why choose to bring that pain into your presence? I struggled with this section of our book. Actually, it was the very last section that I wrote. But I've learned that forgiveness doesn't absolve those who hurt you, but it frees you to be happy, to love, and to move on. And there are some basic steps for forgiveness. One, make a decision and move on. And that sounds much easier than it is. But on the other hand, it is easy because you make that decision. The offense is in the past, and by not forgiving, you're choosing to keep it as a living thing in your present, in your mind. Number two, try to understand when you try to forgive. My mother always said, people fall short, but they're doing the best they can. And I really do believe that. People may fail us, but they are doing the best they can. Three, when you're dealing with forgiveness, be like water. This is my favorite step, and I apply it whenever I'm struggling with a problem. Try to flow around the stones, bend with the wind, accept, as the Buddhists say. People are flawed and will hurt each other either by intention or generally it's accidental. So try to be like water and flow. Four, take responsibility for your role, inadvertent or otherwise. And I have found when I struggle with forgiveness that I can always find a kernel of culpability on my part. And it is so freeing to find that and to not feel like a victim. Five, be kind instead of right. Kindness elevates the offense to the rearview mirror. And then six, send love. Thich Nhat Hanh, who is one of my favorite philosophers, poets, writers, wrote, compassion is a verb. One classic example of forgiveness is the legendary Nelson Mandela, who was the first Black president of South Africa, and whose life's work and passion was fighting apartheid. He was imprisoned, as you know, for 27 years. So think about that, 27 years of his life lost. And when he was released from prison, he was asked, do you have resentment against your white captors? And he gave the most elegant answer. He said this. He said, I have no bitterness. I have no resentment. Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. He exemplified resilience through forgiveness. He said, I know that if I continued to hate these people, I was still in prison. He recognized the need to leave bitterness and hatred behind. His fortitude and forgiveness reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. Even if I knew that tomorrow the world would go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree. Martin Luther said that. One of the four F's is for others. So there's no more surefire way to be happy and more resilient than to be of use, to live your life with purpose for others. And get your pad of paper ready, because I'm going to ask you to write down your life purpose, if you know it or what you think it might be. And I'd love for you to be able to share this with others as well. His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, we are visitors on this planet. We are here for 90 or 100 years at the very most. During that period, we must try to do something good, something useful with our lives. If you contribute to other people's happiness, you will find the true goal, the true meaning of life. So use the grace of your life for kindness, to be kind to others, to be of service for others. Because there are benefits in your kindness for yourself and for the recipients. So random acts of kindness, of which you've probably thought about or read about, here are some of the benefits. The recipients of your kind deed, they feel loved, they experience awe, they're motivated to pay forward the kindness and are rewarded as a giver themselves, and they have increased feelings of self-worth. I know this because I can remember about 5 years ago, I was in line at Starbucks, and when I went to pay for my coffee, they said, someone paid for your coffee. Someone comes in every day and he pays for coffee for 5 people. And I said, oh my gosh, I would love to thank this person. And they said, no, he doesn't want to be recognized. And I'm still telling that story years later. I have a friend who would pay for the tolls of people, a toll for the person behind him on the Mass Pike. Now, we don't have the toll booths anymore, but that was always something I thought was really fun, and I started that practice. But the benefits of kindness is the giver. The benefits to you, you who volunteer, those who volunteer report fewer aches and pains than those who do not. Giving pushes the body to produce serotonin, a chemical that provides healing and calming feelings. And here's a great benefit. Kind acts result in 23% less cortisol, the stress hormone, and that slows the aging process. So both the giver and the receiver have this shared benefit. They have increased oxytocin, a hormone that helps lower blood pressure, improved overall heart health, and increased self-esteem and optimism. So here's some things I was trying to think of in this time of quarantine, like what can we do in terms of random acts of kindness? Restaurants are opening up. Give a big tip. These people have been unemployed for a while, and write the name of the server. Ask the server's name and write it down on the check. Call a friend of neighbor, somebody who might be in a nursing home, or a neighbor who's in quarantine, and ask if you can run an errand, if they would like to have food or something, a book dropped off outside their door. And this is the absolute best time to donate to a food bank. 50 million people have filed for unemployment. Some are struggling to eat and to feed their families. Grocery stores often collect food, or you can Google a local food bank. So the message in this is the most surefire way to be happier is to have a singular life purpose. There's no greater example that I can think of than Christopher Reeve. Think about this. He had everything. He was a movie star. He had a successful family, a successful film career. He was gorgeous. A tragic accident left him a quadriplegic whose every breath was dependent on a respirator. Yet Christopher Reeve, in this unimaginable altered state, thrived. He could have given up. He could have felt sorry for himself. But what did he do with this horrific situation? He founded a foundation to help those with spinal cord injuries. And when he spoke of his physical state, he said, "I'm not living the life I thought I would lead, but it does have meaning, purpose. There is love, there is joy, there is laughter." And that, as I mentioned, is hedonic adaptation. He was an optimistic, happy person, and after grappling with this just tragic situation, he adapted and came back to his happiness level. So when you think of your purpose, and I would like you to write it down for yourself, or please feel free to share, it doesn't have to be grand. You know, we asked people in our book when we were writing it to share their purpose, and we have a list of examples. And some said to serve others, to connect with others, to love and bolster my friends and family, to enrich my life with music and live with abundance, to access my spiritual depth and resourcefulness, inspire the world by example, that's a good one, to be the best grandmother and mother, and to tend my garden with love. Someone wrote, "I have not yet found my purpose, but until I do, I will find happiness by being the best friend, daughter, sister I can be, and by being a compassionate caregiver of animals." And so now take a minute and write down your life purpose if you know it. Here's mine. I'll read it real quickly because I wrote it in one sitting for the book and didn't even change a comma. Mine is to pay attention to this precious world in which we live for such a brief time, and to use the light that is our life to radiate kindness, to learn and to use that knowledge to illuminate the darkness, to appreciate, to be forgive, and to be grateful. So that's basically all of it. And I will leave you with these last thoughts. We've all had difficulties. We've all had setbacks and disappointments. I know all of us have had setbacks and burdens that we think we cannot bear. But consider Zorba, who famously said when faced with the destruction of his dreams, "Teach me to dance." There are times in life when we all need to learn to dance once again. And I think it's appropriate as we grapple with the plague of COVID, to quote from one of my favorite books, Camus' The Plague. And this quote has been hanging in my house and all of my houses since I was 26 years old, by Camus. In the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer. And that makes me happy. For it says that no matter how hard the world pushes against me, within me, there's something stronger, something better pushing right back. And Jen, I was going to close with the poem, but I don't know if we have time, so I will just leave that.
Sure.
Okay.
No, we absolutely do.
Yeah, okay. And it's not too long, but I think it's on the theme of resilience. Our book has 10 poems in it, and I love poetry. And poetry is actually, and I gave a talk to an international audience about a month ago, and I had some real short, like, examples of how you can make yourself happier. Reading poetry, a poem a day, is a really great one. So I leave you with this poem. When you have no words for the wounds, but let me tell you, it's called Gathering Light for Winter. When you have no words for the wounds, when your body is as hollowed out and dark as a jack-o'-lantern in November, when you have lost your north, your south, your east, your west, stay still. Words for the pain are forming beneath the skin of your patience. Your body is gathering light for winter. Your compass is emerging through water. Sometimes dying is the only way to live again. It may take all your stories away. It may hunt and kill your pride, so you are left with nothing but questions in space, howling in the night. What next? What now? What for? This is when grace pours her warm milk into your wounds and advises you to rest, to steal the secrets of sorrow and learn her heavy song, so that you can become an instrument of resilience, turning ever forward with more than you were born with. For isn't holding hands with sorrow a bridge, dying while you are still alive, birthing your next self? So thank you. Thank you for staying with me. And I would love, if you have time, to hear some of what people have shared in terms of gratitude.
Absolutely. Let me show you what they shared with you when you asked about them, what they're grateful for. So I'm going to read them to you. It says, my health, my family, my friends and family, seeing my children become adults glitter, you,
Nice.
laughter, that one of my children is listening to this and reaching deep inside herself. Music, grateful for the universal healthcare in Canada, surgery in 2 weeks. Second chances in life and cancer. Seeing my daughter after 4 months of quarantine. My 15-and-a-half-year-old dog. My purpose is to fully live and leave a trail of sparkly joy behind me. And that's some of the ones that are on there for you.
Beautiful. Are there any life purposes?
Any what?
Did anyone share their life purpose?
I don't have that yet. I don't want to share that yet, but you might be getting some in a moment.
Yeah.
Just so everybody knows as well, you know this is being recorded, so this will be on the website. And all the resources that Gina was referring to with all the wonderful books and everything, we will have those as resources. We'll make sure you have that. So I know there was a lot of books mentioned. I know myself, I wasn't writing quite as fast as I should have, but we'll have that there so you won't miss anything. Gina's going to share that with us. One of the things that came in was inspire others by example, Gina.
Yeah.
And she said that was her life purpose.
Perfect life purpose.
Oh, actually, I apologize. One of the other ones that was a different one. And one of those was my purpose is to fully live and leave a trail of sparkly joy behind me. Sounds like a great purpose if you ask me.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
All right. Does anyone have any other questions? Just waiting one more second, Gina, just to make sure. It was a pretty incredible talk. Very moved. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you for inviting
If we
me.
get any other questions, I'll make sure I send them to you, and we'll post this. So that was very moving and very touching.
Thank you. Thanks.
Everyone is saying wonderful. Thank you very, very much. So
Thank you.
All right. All right. With that, everyone is saying thank you to you. Thank you for your time, your energy. They're so grateful for you. So thank you so much. Excellent. She wants to know when the next one is. Isn't a person asking when the next one is? Trust me, I've already tried to wrangle her. I think we'll have her wrangled very shortly. Everyone is saying awesome. Thank you for sharing your private adversities. They really appreciate that. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. Again, we'll have this posted on the website. We're so grateful to have her. So on behalf of everybody here, Gina, thank you so, so much. And we're very grateful for you today and your time today. So, and everyone's saying you're wonderful and uplifting.
Oh, thank you.
Very
Thank
true.
you so much. I'm grateful.
All right. Thank you, everyone.